The night my boss set hidden cameras all over his mansion to catch a thief, the only thing he caught was me, sliding across his drawing room floor in my socks, wearing his shirt, singing into a wooden spoon. I did not know the cameras existed. I did not know Julian Corsini was 3 floors above me in the dark, watching every ridiculous spin on a bank of monitors. And I definitely did not know that the thief he was actually hunting wanted nothing in that house at all. Nothing you could sell, nothing you could hold. What they wanted was a secret that had been hiding inside his most worthless possessions for 23 years. My name is Sadie Quinn, and this is the story of how a stolen dance changed everything. I should back up 1 week, because none of it makes sense without the train ticket. I was 31, drowning in debt, and I had just taken a live-in housekeeping job at a walled estate on the North Shore of Massachusetts, the kind of place with iron gates and no neighbors in sight. The pay was double anything I had ever earned. The catch, everybody whispered, was the owner. Julian Corsini ran the oldest crime family in Boston. He was 46, quiet in a way that made rooms go quiet with him, and he remembered everything. The first morning, he watched me straighten a stack of newspapers and said, without looking up from his coffee, that the crossword page went on top. He noticed everything. I told myself that was a good quality in an employer. I was wrong about a lot of things that first week, but not about that. The house itself was beautiful and dead. A ballroom with the furniture sheeted like ghosts. A drawing room with a record player nobody touched. Staff moved through it softly, like nurses in a hospital ward. Mrs. Abernathy, the cook, told me on my second day that I would get used to the silence. I remember thinking that getting used to silence sounded like the saddest skill a person could learn. Then came the train ticket. On my 4th morning, Julian stood in the drawing room holding an empty frame that belonged on the mantel, and the temperature of the whole house dropped 10 degrees. A framed train ticket, old and yellowed, had vanished overnight. Not the silver, not the painting worth more than my childhood home. A ticket stub worth maybe $4, and Julian looked at that empty frame the way other men look at a coffin. His security chief, a tired man named Doyle, walked the room twice and found nothing. No forced entry, no disturbed alarm. Cash sitting openly in the desk drawer, untouched. Julian listened to all of it, with his eyes closed, then said one sentence I have never forgotten. He said, "They did not come here to rob me." He said it like a man reading the first line of a letter he had been dreading for years. Here is what nobody told me yet. The train ticket was not the first thing to disappear. Over the past 2 months, a silver tie clip, a matchbook from a closed restaurant, a cracked vinyl record sleeve, and a single cufflink had all vanished, one at a time, from the most watched house in New England. Every one of them worthless. Every one of them, I would learn, priceless. Julian made a decision that afternoon, and he made it the way he made everything, alone. If the thief was someone already inside his walls, then his walls would start watching back. By midnight, cameras the size of shirt buttons sat inside the drawing room, the corridors, the library, the dining room, the entrances, even the service halls. Everywhere except the bedrooms and bathrooms and my little apartment over the garage. He did not tell the staff. He did not tell me. He wanted everyone behaving naturally, he would explain later. And there is a special kind of logic to that, which only makes sense if you have spent your whole life assuming the people around you are lying. I want you to remember that he kept it secret, because what happened next is the entire reason you are hearing this story. 3 nights after the cameras went in, the washing machine in the service basement gave up on life. It flooded mid-cycle with my uniform inside, and I stood there at 11 at night in soaked sneakers, holding a dripping gray dress, in a house where everyone had gone home or gone to bed. My own clothes were locked in my apartment, and my apartment key was in the pocket of the wet dress, and the spare was with Mrs. Abernathy, who had driven home hours ago. The laundry room, however, held a fresh load of Julian's shirts, pressed and warm from the dryer. I want to be clear that I stood there for a full minute arguing with myself. But it was midnight, the house was empty, and the choice was between a white dress shirt that hung on me like a tent and pneumonia. I chose the shirt. It smelled like cedar. It fell past my knees. I looked like a child playing dress-up, and I did not care. And then, because I was alone in a mansion at midnight for the first time in my life, and because the drawing room had a record player and a polished oak floor that went on forever, I did the thing my family spent 15 years teaching me not to do. I danced. I put on the only record sitting beside the player, an old scratched vinyl with a cracked sleeve, and I let it carry me. I need you to understand what dancing meant to me. I started lessons at 6. I was good, genuinely good, the kind of good that made teachers use the word gift. Then, money got tight, and my parents sat me down at 12 and explained that dancing was a hobby for other people's children, and my sister Brooke called it my princess phase, and eventually I learned to keep the music inside my head where it cost nothing and disappointed no one. For 19 years, that is where it stayed. Until that night, in a borrowed shirt, in a stranger's drawing room, I slid across that floor in my socks, like the wood was ice. I used a wooden spoon from the kitchen as a microphone and sang the chorus badly, joyfully, at the ceiling. I did spins so dramatic they were basically theater. I finished with a bow so ridiculous that I laughed at myself, alone, in the dark. What I did not know was that 3 floors above me, Julian Corsini had been reviewing security footage, hunting for a thief who moved like smoke through his house. He had opened the drawing room feed to check a timestamp, and instead of a thief, he got me. A grown woman in his shirt, conducting an orchestra of nobody, more alive than anything that had happened inside those walls in 23 years. He told me later that he watched the whole performance. All 4 minutes and 11 seconds of it. He said he kept waiting to feel angry, and the feeling never arrived. Instead, he sat in the dark and watched a stranger be happy in the one room of his house he had quietly given up on, and something in his chest that had been clenched since 2003 loosened by exactly 1 degree. If a crime boss catching his housekeeper dancing in his shirt on a spy camera made you smile even a little, take 1 second and tap like, because what grew out of that footage is the strangest and truest story I know how to tell. Now here is the part where I find out I had an audience, and I promise you, I made him regret it. I found out the next morning on the breakfast tray. Under the folded napkin sat an index card in precise black handwriting. It read, Footwork, 8. Security awareness, 0. My soul left my body. I read it 4 times, and then, because terror and rage make me brave in equal measure, I flipped the card over and wrote my own review. Employer boundaries, pending investigation. I sent it back with the coffee pot. Julian did not hide from it. That is the thing I have to give him, the thing that changed everything between us. He called me into the library that same hour, pulled up the camera system on the main screen, and walked me through every lens in the house, every location, every blind spot. He showed me my own apartment was clean. He showed me the bedrooms were clean. He did not make me ask. Then I told him exactly what I thought. I told him you do not get to watch people when they believe they are alone, that the version of a person you catch on a hidden camera belongs to them and not to you, and that a man with his resources had 100 ways to catch a thief that did not involve turning his staff into suspects on film. I was shaking the whole time. I did not stop. He listened. He did not interrupt, did not threaten, did not remind me what he was. When I finished, he said 2 things. First, that I was right to be angry. Second, that if I wanted to leave, I would get a full month's pay and the best reference in New England, no strings, no consequences. He offered me the door. That mattered more than the apology. I stayed, but I stayed on new terms, and I said them out loud so they would exist in the world. I wanted the camera locations in writing. I wanted to be told before anything changed, and I wanted it understood that my private quarters were mine, full stop. He agreed to all of it without negotiating. It was the first honest conversation either of us had in that house, and it started with me singing into a spoon. Here is where the story stops being funny, because 2 nights later, the thief came back. A fountain pen this time, cheap and scratched, gone from the library desk, and when Julian pulled the footage, we both sat down to watch the recordings together, the new normal after my speech, and we found something that turned my stomach to ice water. There was nothing to watch. 12 minutes of the drawing room camera, gone. Not corrupted, not glitchy, gone, and replaced by a perfect, seamless loop of an empty room. We checked the logs, staff accounted for on other cameras. Doors never opened, alarms never tripped, no vehicle on the gate camera, no figure on the grounds. 12 minutes, from 2:04 to 2:16 in the morning, during which a human being entered a locked room, took a worthless pen, and left through a wall. We pulled the old incidents and timed them. The tie clip, 12 minutes. The matchbook, 12 minutes. The cufflink, 12 minutes. Every theft sat inside an identical 12-minute hole in the footage, like the thief carried a key to time itself. Julian had installed cameras to answer the question of who. Now we had a much worse question: how? I want to be honest about what those nights did to us. We started reviewing footage together every evening, the feared head of the Corsini family and his housekeeper, shoulder to shoulder at a monitor, arguing about shadows. Somewhere in those hours, he stopped being my employer in my head and started being Julian, a man who owned 400 things and trusted none of them. And I think he watched me notice things. That is my one talent. A housekeeper knows where everything belongs. It was me who saw the pattern first. I was dusting the mantel where the train ticket used to hang, and something about the empty frame pulled a thread in my memory. The record sleeve I had danced to, the one with the cracked corner, the matchbook from a restaurant called The Gull. I had seen dates on these things, inscriptions, stamps. That evening I spread the inventory list across the library table and checked every one. Every object came from the same year, 2003. Julian went very still when I showed him. It is a specific kind of stillness, the kind strong men use instead of flinching. I asked him what happened in 2003, and he looked at me for a long moment, weighing 23 years of silence against the woman holding his list of stolen nothings. Then he told me about Elise. In 2003, Julian was 23 years old, and he was going to run, not from the law, from his own family. He had been born into the Corsini organization the way other men are born into farms, and he had decided, quietly and completely, that he would not inherit it. He had train tickets. He had a plan to leave Massachusetts and never come back, and he had Elise Harrow. They planned the whole escape at a harbor restaurant called The Gull, over bad coffee, on Tuesday nights. They listened to the same record so many times the sleeve cracked. The tie clip was the one he wore the night he told her he would choose her over the family. Every object the thief had taken was a piece of that plan, a relic of the 1 year Julian Corsini had dared to want a different life. Then, 11 days before the train was supposed to leave, Elise vanished. No note, no body, no explanation. Her apartment was clean, her bank account untouched, her car at the curb. Julian waited at the station with 2 tickets until the train pulled out. He never got on. He went home, buried the boy who wanted to leave, and became the man the family needed. He never learned if she had betrayed him, gotten frightened, or simply chosen a better life without him. For 23 years, he told me, he treated that disappearance like a verdict. If the one person he showed his true self to could walk away without a word, then showing anyone his true self was a mistake. He built a life on that lesson, and now someone was breaking into the most secure private home in New England. Someone who could bend his $1 million security like wire, and all they wanted was the wreckage of that year. I asked him the obvious question. Could it be Elise herself, come back? He said he had thought about nothing else for 2 months, but the things being taken were things she already knew. Why steal your own memories? No, he said. Someone else was reading his past like a map, and they were getting closer to something. He just could not see what. While we were chasing ghosts, my sister came back into my life. Brooke is 8 years older than me, and she has always treated my existence like a small business she reluctantly manages. She called after months of silence, warm and chatty, and I was so starved for family that I ignored the alarm bells. She visited twice, asked about my job, my boss, the house. She asked, laughing, whether my handsome employer ever talked about his past. Then, on her third visit, sitting in my little apartment over the garage, she broke. She cried and told me the truth. A man named Conrad Mercer had been paying her for months. Mercer was Julian's most trusted advisor, 67 years old, silver-haired, soft-spoken, the man who had guided Julian after the old generation died, practically family, and he was paying my sister to find out what Julian remembered about 2003. The questions were so specific they scared me. Which missing object upset Julian the most? Did he still talk about Elise? Had I, the housekeeper, learned anything about that year? Had he changed his security routines lately? Brooke swore she thought it was harmless, just an old man checking on a friend. But she took the money, and she kept taking it, and she only confessed because the questions had started to frighten her. I refused to answer another question, and I told Brooke not to take another dollar. But here is where I made the worst mistake of my life. I did not tell Julian. For the first time in my adult life, I had safety, privacy, savings, a door that locked from my side, and I was so afraid that the words my sister spied on you would evaporate all of it that I swallowed them. So let me ask you, because I still lie awake over it, if the truth could cost you the first safe home you had ever known, and the person asking for it was a man the whole city feared, would you have told him right away, or would you have protected your sister one more week? Tell me in the comments, honestly. Because what I chose blew up exactly the way you are afraid it did. Julian found out on his own, 11 days later. He was already quietly auditing Mercer's communications, because a man who survives 30 years in that life audits everyone eventually, and there it was. Payments, questions, my sister's name. He came to the staff apartment himself, which he had never done, and he stood in my doorway and asked me, very calmly, how long I had known that my family was selling information about his dead heart to his oldest friend. I did not lie. I told him everything, every visit, every question, every day I had stayed silent. I watched something close behind his eyes while I talked, like a door swinging shut inside him, and the worst part was how polite he stayed. He thanked me for my honesty now. The word now did all the damage of a slap. He said the arrangement would continue professionally, and he left. He did not fire me. Somehow that was worse. Being tolerated is colder than being thrown out. I moved my work to a strictly professional footing, did my job beautifully, and spoke to him only about schedules and supplies. The warmth we had built over those monitors went into deep freeze, and the house went back to being a hospital ward. Brooke called twice. I did not pick up. I told myself I had lost everything anyway, so there was nothing left to protect. That thought turned out to be the most useful one I ever had. Because with nothing left to lose, I went back to the one place I still had power, which was my own 2 eyes. I started a full inventory of the drawing room, shelf by shelf, object by object, the way I was trained, and on the 4th shelf of the record cabinet, I found something impossible. The cracked vinyl sleeve, the one the thief had stolen 6 weeks earlier, was back, sitting on the shelf, rotated exactly 90 degrees from the way I always shelve it. My hands started shaking, and not from fear. A thief takes things. But this thing had been taken, kept for weeks, and returned, set down carelessly by someone who did not know my system because nobody in that house knew my system but me. Nothing was missing from it, which meant the intruder never wanted the sleeve at all. They wanted something on the sleeve. They were not stealing keepsakes. They were photographing them. I pulled every remaining object from 2003 and studied them under the desk lamp with my grandmother's magnifying glass. And there it was, hiding in plain sight, a faded date written in pencil inside the matchbook. A manufacturing mark on the cufflink, half scratched away, initials on the record sleeve, so faint you would need to know they were there. An old reservation number on the train ticket frame's backing card. Tiny, meaningless marks. Meaningless alone. Together, a message. Someone in 2003 had hidden information across a trail of worthless objects, objects they knew Julian would never throw away because they were all he had left of her. Elise had not just disappeared from his life. Before she left, she had turned his grief into a filing cabinet. And now, 23 years later, someone was coming at night to read it, one page at a time. I brought it all to Julian, the returned sleeve, the marks, the theory. He listened without the door swinging shut this time, and when I finished, he asked the right question. If the thief is reading, not stealing, how do we prove it? That is when I proposed the decoy, a fake keepsake with a false date from 2003 hidden on it, left out like bait. If it got photographed, we had our answer. Only Julian and I would know it was fake. I built it myself, aged a photograph frame with tea and a hairdryer, and wrote a reservation number inside it, pointing to a date that never happened. On Friday night, the cameras looped their 12 minutes, and in the morning, the frame had moved 4 inches. Someone had opened it, photographed the false number, and put it back. 3 things were now proven. The intruder was reading. The intruder knew what mattered, and the 12-minute gap was not magic. It was manufactured. Julian looked at me across that desk for a long time, and then he said the closest thing to an apology I think that man has ever produced. He said, "You brought me proof instead of asking me to believe you. That is worth more than loyalty." I had my footing back. More than that, I had his respect, and this time it was the earned kind. Now we had a spy to catch, and Julian had a suspicion about where the 12-minute key had come from. That suspicion had a shape, and it was a shape I had noticed weeks earlier without understanding it. During my inventory, I had found an old brass grate behind the record cabinet, painted over decades ago, leading to a service duct the modern blueprints did not show. The estate had been a fishing baron's palace before the Corsinis bought it, and old houses keep old secrets. Julian looked at the grate and said, "We do not seal it, we watch it." For 6 nights, nothing. On the 7th, the loop hit the cameras at 2:04 in the morning, exactly on schedule, and Julian and I were not watching monitors. We were standing in the unlit pantry off the drawing room, in the dark, like 2 children at a slumber party, if slumber parties involved a mafia boss holding his breath. At 2:09, the grate moved. A man unfolded himself out of the wall, old, gray, deliberate, and reached for the record cabinet with a small camera in his hand. Julian turned on the light. The old man did not run, did not fight, did not even flinch. He simply set his camera down on the shelf, looked at Julian for a long moment, and said, "You have your mother's eyes, Julian. I hope you are smarter than your father's friends." His name was Amos Reed, 68 years old, retired, he said, from a career he was not permitted to name. And then he told us the truth, that rearranged 23 years. Elise Harrow had not been a girl Julian met by accident. She had been a financial investigator, working covertly inside an inquiry into money moving through the Corsini organization. But her target was never Julian. Her target was Conrad Mercer. Amos had been her handler, the man she reported to through dead drops and coded letters, the man who taught her how to hide evidence where no one would think to look. Here is what Elise had found in the fall of 2003. Mercer had learned about the young couple's escape plan, the route, the timing, the contacts Julian had quietly arranged, and instead of warning Julian, Mercer had done something far worse. He had quietly copied pieces of that escape route, the safe contacts, the unguarded crossings, the clean channels, and rebuilt them into a private financial network for people who could not afford to be seen moving money. He had turned Julian's dream of freedom into his own business. Elise could not expose him. Mercer controlled the family's senior security, and Julian trusted him like a father. Accusing him without airtight proof would destroy her investigation, and telling Julian the truth would force the man she loved to choose between her and the man who had raised him. So she encoded everything, names, dates, account traces, across the objects of their escape plan, then vanished to keep Julian and the case out of Mercer's reach. She had genuinely intended to be on that train, Amos said. The investigation was supposed to close in October. She missed her window by 11 days, and once her cover was compromised, staying would have painted a target on Julian's back. For 23 years, he had believed he was a man a woman could walk away from. The truth was, she had loved him enough to leave. He sat down heavily in his armchair, a 23-year-old on a train platform again. Amos had come back because the network had woken up. Dormant money tied to the old 2003 route had started moving again, and he needed Elise's identifiers to prove who was running it. He had not trusted Julian, because for all Amos knew, Julian had inherited Mercer's arrangement along with everything else. It was my decoy, the false date, that finally convinced him someone in this house was hunting the truth and not the money. He said a thief would not have bothered to lie to a thief. Which left one question hanging over all of us. Mercer had been paying Brooke to learn what Julian remembered, which meant he suspected what Elise had done, which meant he had spent 2 decades sleeping beside a bomb he could not find. Julian's first instinct, I saw it cross his face like weather, was to end Mercer the old way. It would have been easy, it would have been justified. It would have made him exactly the man 2003 was supposed to save him from becoming. It was Amos who stopped him, and it was me who gave them the weapon. Amos said, "Men like Mercer are not killed by bullets. They are killed by records. We cannot touch what we cannot prove, and we cannot prove what he never says out loud, so we will make him say it." And the way to make him say it was the decoy method I had already proven. We would feed Mercer a second false piece, one only he would recognize, and watch what he reached for. The plan took 9 days, and it required Julian to do the hardest thing in this entire story, which was nothing. He had to sit across a dinner table from Mercer, accept the old man's brandy, listen to his advice about staff discipline, and smile, knowing this man had been feeding on his family's trust since before I was born. He even let Mercer believe the housekeeper had been caught snooping and dismissed, which explained why I was suddenly invisible around the estate. The bait was beautiful, and I am still proud of it. I built a second fake, a page of a train timetable from 2003, coffee-stained and soft at the folds, and hidden in its margin, in Elise's old handwriting style, was a route continuation. A false one, implying her evidence had not only survived but grown. We let Amos's camera be seen photographing it, just once, just sloppily enough, through a window Mercer was known to use. We made sure the right eyes saw the wrong thing. Mercer moved within 60 hours. That is the thing about a man guarding a 23-year-old secret. He does not verify, he panics, and panic has a paper trail. He activated phones silent for years and contacted partners in 3 states whose names matched the dormant accounts Amos had been watching. He arranged, in coded language that Amos's people transcribed in full, to relocate the entire operation, and in doing so he confirmed every account, every partner, every thread that Elise had nearly died to document. The trap never had to close on Mercer. He built it around himself and locked the door from the inside. The end came on a gray Thursday morning in the library, and no one threw a punch, but it was still the most violent room I have ever stood in. Julian invited Mercer to review estate business. Amos was present, introduced as an old associate. I served coffee, because Mercer had never once in 20 years looked directly at the help. Then Julian slid a single photograph across the desk, the false timetable page. He said, "Tell me what you see, Conrad." Mercer looked at it for 4 seconds, and in those 4 seconds, Julian told me later, he watched his second father die. The old man's face did not change at all, but his hand moved toward the phone in his jacket, and that small, reflexive movement was a confession no lawyer could argue away. Julian said, very quietly, "I know about the route. I know what it was built from. I know about Elise, and I know about the payments to the housekeeper's sister. Amos has everything you touched in the last 9 days, and copies are already in the hands of people neither of us can reach." What Mercer said next is why I can tell this story without hating him entirely. He did not beg. He looked at Julian and said, "You were going to throw it all away for a girl. The family would have collapsed. I saved it." And Julian answered with the calm of a man who had finally put down something heavy. He said, "No, Conrad, you saved yourself, and you used my life to do it. You will resign from every position today. You will sign everything Amos puts in front of you, and you will never learn what mercy I chose not to show you." That restraint was Julian's victory, not the evidence. The old Julian would have buried the man. The man Elise believed in let the truth do the burying instead. Amos stayed 3 more days, and on the last evening he gave Julian an envelope Elise had left with him in 2003, to be delivered if the case ever truly closed. I never read it, that belongs to him, but I know the last line, because Julian told me, through the kind of tears strong men pretend are allergies. It said, "The train was always going to be real. Be happy anyway. Life had simply made a liar out of her plans, the way it does." Brooke came to see me 2 weeks later, with store-brand flowers and a speech. I could tell she had practiced. She wanted to move past it. That was her phrase, as if betrayal were traffic. I did not scream. I did not forgive either. I told her I loved her, and that she no longer had a key to the private rooms of my life. "Family is blood," I told her, "but trust is a door," and she had shown me she would walk through mine with muddy shoes for $400. She left angry that day. She called again at Christmas. "We are building something smaller and truer now, the 2 of us, and this time I believe it will hold." And then there was the ballroom. 3 weeks after Mercer's resignation, Julian unlocked the dead ballroom where the furniture had slept under sheets since before I was born. The sheets were gone. The floors had been refinished to a mirror shine, and against the far wall stood the old record player, the cracked sleeve vinyl already on the turntable. He had rebuilt the room as a dance studio, my dance studio, and he had personally supervised the removal of every camera from it. I want to be honest about what I felt, because it was not simple gratitude. It was terror. This was the dream, handed to me by a powerful man, and everything in my working-class bones warned me that gifts like this come with invisible strings. So I did the bravest thing in this whole story, braver than the decoy, braver than the trap. I negotiated. I told him I would not accept the room if it made me a kept thing. I named my terms: a real raise, fixed hours, my own quarters guaranteed in writing, full disclosure of every camera on the property forever, and the option of my own apartment someday. He agreed to every word without bargaining, handed me the deed to the room's use in my name, and said, it was always supposed to be someone's happy place. He would know. If you have ever had to choose between a gift and your freedom, you know why this ending matters. And if this story kept you company tonight, subscribe and stay with us. because the next one is already waiting. Now, the last scene, and I saved it because it is the whole reason for the title. A month later, on a rainy Sunday night, I went down to my ballroom alone, put on the cracked sleeve record, and danced. Not for an audience, not for a camera, just for the woman who had spent 19 years keeping the music in her head. Halfway through the second song, I felt a presence at the door. Julian stood in the doorway, in a plain sweater, just watching. The man who had once secretly filmed me did not take one single step inside. He stayed at the threshold of the one room in his house with no cameras, the room that belonged to me first, and he asked, quietly, "May I come in?" I said yes. Then I held out my hand and said, "Then you have to dance with me." Security awareness still zero. He laughed, the real laugh, the rare one, and he took my hand, and we danced badly and wonderfully in a room with no cameras, where the first dance he ever saw was stolen, and this one was given. And the best things I have, I no longer do in secret.